This is my son Avi at 3 months. My wife and I call this picture the Happy Buddha. I think it's a good description. And when he was born in 2018, I was wondering what his life and also our planet will look like when he's 32 years old. Will he live in a free and democratic society with abundant resources and functioning ecosystems? I'm afraid he might not if we continue business as usual. I'm afraid he might live in a world with devastating wars over the remaining resources. I'm afraid he might face a destabilized world due to hundreds of millions of people who had to leave their homes because they became uninhabitable. Well, our actions today will determine my son's future and also all our futures. And in the end, it all comes down to one molecule, which is carbon dioxide. This graph over the last 150 years you might have seen before. The black line is the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, and the blue and red bars are the average temperature, and you can see that it correlates with the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Today, we humans have already increased the concentration to 420 parts per million, and this led in turn to a temperature increase of 1 degree Celsius. And we're actually continuing to add carbon to the atmosphere, roughly 40 billion tons per year. Just to give you a feeling, this is the equivalent of burning 500,000 liters of gasoline every second. But now let's take a different perspective. Let's look at the last 20,000 years. This was the temperature of the last ice age. What did the world look like during this ice age? We had roughly 200 meters of ice where I'm standing right now. This is the current warm period. And you see it's pretty stable over the last 10,000 years. And that, in turn, enabled us humans to prosper and to build the society we're living in today. Now, the astonishing fact is that the difference between the ice age and the warm period is only 3.5 degrees centigrade. And the shocking fact is that we are right now on a trajectory to add 4 degrees to our global climate in the next 80 years. So what happens when the world warms up? Well, we will see more droughts. This is a local example of the Rhine River in 2018. This is the Palmer Drought Severity Index, showing Europe from the period 1950 to 1980. The color indicates the amount of droughts per decade that occurred. France, for example, had roughly 7 3-month droughts per decade in this period. And this is the forecast for 2040s. Dark red means basically permanent drought. Germany lost around 30% of its agricultural production in 2018 due to a drought. Now you can imagine what this means for our future. Besides droughts, we will also see more wildfires, more floods, more hurricanes. And all of this will lead to more than 140 million climate refugees by 2050. These mass movements will inevitably lead to conflicts and war. But on top of all this human suffering, the financial costs of the climate change are breathtakingly high. Damages at 3.7 degrees warming will accumulate to 550 trillion US dollars. Just to give you a benchmark, the global GDP is at around $80 trillion. So that means actually we can invest tons of money in order to stop or slow down global warming. So how much time do we actually have in order to avoid these catastrophic scenarios? If we continue business as usual, we'll reach 1.5 degrees of warming in 8 years from now. This will mean limited damages, and we stay pretty much in control. In 25 years from now, we will reach 2 degrees of warming. And at that point, the likelihood of tipping points that trigger cascades of further warming increases a lot. Just to give you one example, the Arctic permafrost is storing currently around 1,800 billion tons of carbon. This is twice as much as we have in our atmosphere right now. As the temperature increases, this permafrost will melt, and as it melts, it will release carbon, which will lead to more heat, to more melting, to more carbon. So this is what we want to avoid. Yeah. And in order to avoid this, we need to stay well below 2 degrees. And that means that we have roughly 20 years until we need to be down at 0 emissions. When I first learned about this, I was shocked. I was overwhelmed, and I also didn't want to believe it. But then I wanted to figure out how we can fight global warming and how we can have a positive impact on this. So here's some good news. First of all, it's in our hands. The equation between CO2 concentration and temperature is very clear. The only question is how much CO2 we will emit. The awareness has never been higher. Just think of 1.4 million Germans on the streets in September to protest for more effective climate legislation. And also in terms of technology, we have basically everything at hand that we need. It will only take more courage and willpower to get this done. So what are some concrete climate measures in different areas that we can do? First of all, don't wait. This problem is only getting bigger. In terms of mobility, if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, avoiding a flight is a very impactful way. One flight from Frankfurt to San Francisco and back in eco, not in business, emits 4.7 tons of CO2. The average German is emitting 10 tons in the entire year. I flew twice for leisure in the last 12 months, and I also travel by train instead of plane within Germany. In terms of electricity, I switched to a renewable energy provider that is selling only renewable energy. I also installed LED lights and put some solar onto our roof. I became vegetarian and avoid animal products whenever I can. I also do not throw away any food. I compensate all emissions that I cannot reduce with a certified non-profit organization. I basically put a high effort to make climate change a prominent topic in social interaction and also on the social media. I demonstrated in September, and I will also demonstrate this Friday on the street, and I voted green. And now the question is, how can you scale yourself? I turned my company climate neutral. If you work for someone else, influence your boss to turn your company climate neutral as well. I also co-founded an initiative that binds its members to concrete climate action. Today, more than 200 companies already joined, with overall more than 200,000 employees. So what is the outcome of all this action for me so far? I have a more healthy diet. I am saving some money on the electricity bill. I have less stress traveling. I just travel less. Yeah, it's actually good. And it's also good to see other people's action. Yeah. Am I perfect? Of course not. Am I the best role model? Probably not. Am I fighting to do the right thing? Hell yes. So what's holding you back? Maybe some people think, I can make no difference. Well, let me ask you, what if Steve Jobs or Gandhi would have had this attitude towards life? Maybe you think, politicians need to fix the problem. Do you think Germany would be united if the people would not have stood up in 1989? Maybe you think India and China need to change. Well, if the Western world is not leading by example, no one can follow. Knowing all this, I think there is no excuse not to act. Climate change must become the leading principle for our future decision-making. We are the generation that will determine the fate of mankind. Having said that, I know that we all like to consume inspiring content. But I also know that information does not always lead to transformation. And I'm here to start your personal climate action journey today. So if what I said resonated with you, I would like you to stand up now. That's great. It's a lot of resonance, a little bit of peer pressure, and a few people that disagree. Now, please take out your phone, and I would like you to send a message to one of your family members or to your best friend with this sentence: I pledge to start taking climate action today. If you do this now, this will help you through your climate action. You're creating an accountability partner, and that is a great thing to have when you want to get stuff done. For me personally, when my son asks me what my role was in the climate crisis in 30 years, I want to be able to tell him that I did everything I could in order to stop global warming and to protect our planet. And I hope you will be able to say the same. Thanks.